These are the killing fields, where 1 in 4 Cambodians were wiped out by famine, torture, and execution, by the cruel indifference of Pol Pot. This is Chairman Mao's China, where 45 million people starved to death. Things got so bad that the weak ones, children, the elderly, became food, eaten by their neighbors. Pol Pot and Mao both claimed the best of intentions. They promised a better society, a new world of abundance, to each person according to their need. They were going to build utopias by planning things out from the top down. So what went wrong? How did these separate attempts at a socialist paradise end up slaughtering millions of people? Pride goes before a fall, and nowhere does humanity fall harder than under the leadership of someone who thinks he knows better than everyone else, the man with a plan. But they ignore what they don't know, what no human could conceivably know. This is what F.A. Hayek calls the fatal conceit. What do these 4 men have in common? They were all credited as the last man to know everything. It wasn't that long ago when it was thought that a single mind could know everything because human knowledge was so limited. But today, with so much to know, we've actually become more ignorant. It's more impossible to conceive of one person knowing everything. This great Austrian economist Friedrich Hayek says, the more men know, the smaller the percentage that any single man can know. This is a common mistake made by socialists and other advocates of central planning. They think that as society evolves and humans learn more, it becomes easier to centralize that knowledge and use it to plan institutions. In fact, the opposite is true. While a central planner might have been able to grasp most of what was known 1,000 years ago, no one today could ever hope to come close. This is what Hayek considered the fundamental problem with central planning. The knowledge problem. Of course, knowledge is not limited to science or facts or anything tangible. A lot of it is personal knowledge of time and place, things that you and I can't even articulate.
The market enables us to extend our ability to talk to each other into all kinds of ways that we can't put into numbers or into words, right? It enables us to have this sort of extra-linguistic communication. Because not everything that we know about the world are things that we can put into numbers and into words. We have inarticulate knowledge where we have hunches, we have guesses. Entrepreneurs who've been in business for a long time know things that they can't always articulate. Yet buying and selling enables them to make that knowledge available to other people.
Hayek, in a way, before the internet, knew that there already was an internet of sorts at work in society through sharing of information, through our capacity to communicate with each other, and the institutions that emerge out of that. Not just prices, not just money, but our mores, our manners, our habits, our superstitions, all the things we share that make life work and make it beautiful. That emerges not because it was passed by some politician or legislation.
Think about all the personal knowledge, things that only you know. Your hopes, your dreams, your aspirations for your family. These are things that can't be known by anybody else. But central planners want to reduce all of that knowledge into a number, into an equation, into pieces of a puzzle so that they can manipulate us from the top down. It does not work because this knowledge, to be meaningful, has to stick with people. It has to stick with you and me.
Many critics of socialism said that the choice is not a plan versus no plan, but whose plan? Is it going to be one plan superimposed through the power of government authority on everyone in the society, or is each individual going to have the latitude and liberty to make his own plans concerning his own life, his values, his goals, to give meaning and purpose to it.
The idea that we can somehow do better than the market through some form of collective, rational planning of economic activity simply doesn't work. And it doesn't work because there's no way for one group or one person to acquire all the knowledge that they would need to have.
The economy is actually an ecosystem that is populated by billions of individuals who have free will. And there's no way to predict what they're going to do. And what they do, of course, is they keep on, the central planners keep on pouring in all the chemicals, which end up killing the ecosystem.
The problem with a single central plan is that if it goes wrong in a big way, as we will soon see. But when planning is decentralized, mistakes happen and are corrected. Like the mythical Hydra, every head that is chopped off is replaced by 2 more, and every plan that doesn't pan out is backed up by thousands more. One of the most famous critiques of socialism by economist Ludwig von Mises points to the price system as an example of how planning happens without government involvement, and how attempts to centralize that planning process always fail.
And Mises said, okay, Mr. Central Planner, you've now nationalized the economy. It's now your responsibility to determine what gets produced, in what quantities, how, to whom it will be distributed. How will you make such decisions in a rational and efficient way that reflects the interests and the desires of the members of the society? And Mises' answer was, they couldn't do this.
When you see a price on something, that single number actually captures a huge amount of information, from the scarcity of the raw materials used, to the amount of labor needed to create the final product, to the relative benefit of all the alternative things that producer could have done with his time and money. As a consumer, you don't need to know any of these details. You just look at the price and decide whether or not to buy. Your decision, along with those of everyone else, provides information that tells producers what to make. But imagine there were no prices, and a central planner was in charge of allocating resources. How would he know what to produce? Or how much? Without prices, there would be no way to know how to direct production. The Soviet Union attempted to solve this problem with an elaborate system of quotas. Since there was no way to ensure that the quotas matched what people actually wanted, shortages and surpluses were a constant problem. Machinery was left to rust, unused, while families starved as food was underproduced. Prices, derived from millions of interactions and preferences, tell us what people want and in what quantities. That knowledge, by its very nature, can't be centralized in one place. The only way it works is for each of us to make our own decisions in the process of working things out. Unfortunately, this was not always so obvious. All of the worst horror stories of socialism involve one person imagining they can design things from the top down, using science to determine where people work and what they produce. This was explicitly the goal of Pol Pot, who studied Marx with the top socialist professors in Paris. Given the opportunity, he tried to put Marx's theories into practice. Pol Pot dreamed of an idyllic agrarian society, but he knew the people would not comply voluntarily. His army, the Khmer Rouge, forced Cambodians living in the urban centers into the countryside. Bankers and businessmen, Chinese and other foreign immigrants were summarily executed to ensure that this noble experiment was pure in blood and soil. Those who survived this forced march to the farmlands were expected to grow food, but factory workers didn't know much about how to be farmers, and the resulting food shortage was cataclysmic. Socialism in practice transformed the Cambodian economy under Pol Pot into a brutally efficient killing machine, snuffing out 1 in 4 lives in less than 4 years. Before Pol Pot, Mao Zedong had a similar plan to impose a reboot on the Chinese economy, but his plan was to transform a farming economy into an industrial powerhouse. Farming peasants would be transformed into steel workers, and China would finally match the United States in industrial production. Mao's Great Leap was a spectacular failure, but he did succeed in diverting resources and labor from the production of food. Tens of millions of people starved to death. The Soviet Union collapsed in part due to its inability to plan without prices. And today we see poverty and death in countries like Venezuela and North Korea, where arrogant leaders have tried to impose their own wills onto whole countries with catastrophic results. In 2015, an artist resolved to create a print version of Wikipedia to find out just how big it really was. Although the project was never completed, the answer turned out to be very big. All of the articles of Wikipedia, not counting pictures, would have filled 7,473 volumes of 700 pages each. To read the whole thing, you would need to devour 143 pages a day, every day, for 100 years. When you consider that most Wikipedia articles are relatively short summaries of their subject, and that they don't include the personal knowledge we all have, the scope of human knowledge is truly amazing. And it's growing all the time. Wikipedia itself is an example of how the decentralized knowledge of many people from all over the world can come together. It has created something that would have been utterly impossible for a panel of experts to curate. It's decentralization at its best, and it's increasingly how the best parts of our society work.
You remember the early days of Wikipedia, people were so incredulous. They thought, well, this could never work. I remember seeing late night comedians make fun of it. Oh, an online encyclopedia that anyone can edit, that's really going to be trustworthy, right? They made fun of it.
Right.
It just seemed like it could never work. It did. And you know, the guy who invented Wikipedia was the pioneer, was Jimmy Wells. He got the idea from reading F.A. Hayek, who saw and spent his life devoted to this difficult, almost mysterious, sometimes even magical observation that order comes about through liberty and not through imposition. That was his theme. And it's a hard thing to learn, that the more you let go, the better things work.
We've seen that top-down control fails because those at the top can never have enough knowledge to coordinate the activities of millions of people, not even with all the supercomputers in the world. And even when they try, the results have been some of the worst cases of human suffering in history. The only other option is to let people plan their own lives, as long as they don't hurt people or take their stuff. Trust that these individual plans will come together into a whole that is greater than the sum of its parts, and that none of us knows as much as all of us.